Our program today is titled A Road Trip into America's Hidden Heart, and it's being presented by Mr. John Drake Robinson, who is an Emmy Award-winning writer. He is also a former Missouri Director of Tourism, so Mr. Robinson puts a different spin on the traditional road trip. For more than 13 years, he drove every road on the Missouri State Highway map. Along the roadsides, he found stories in diners and dives and dead ends, in graveyards and courthouses and museums. He found history and culture beyond the beaten path and tales that shout out from America's flyover country. He discovered the real America beyond the interstate, real people, obscure places, and hidden facts. Please help me in welcoming Mr. John Drake Robinson.
Thank you, President Dina McCaffrey. She said just Dina, but... and thank you, Laura Vilmer and Melissa, Deborah Fink, who originally scheduled me, but now is retired. Two Matts here today, and Jennifer, Zach, and Lisa, John and Christian from the stagecraft part of the college. It's good to be here among the Vikings and the supporters of the Vikings. And you know, it means so much to a college to have the people in the neighborhood support the college. So thank you very much for being here and for what you do, but personally, I'm glad you're here. This is special in a personal way. In 1963, my dad became Missouri Assistant Commissioner of Education for vocational and technical education. At the same time, voters approved the plan for Jefferson College. That came to being thanks to Senator Earl Blackwell from right here in Hillsborough. The vote passed statewide for community colleges by 58 votes. 58 votes statewide. So the fledgling college had to prove its worth, and I think we would all agree that it's surpassed expectations and continues to. You know, in those early days, Dad worked closely with Missouri's junior colleges. And especially with Jefferson College's first president, Dr. Charles McLean, who I knew very well. And Jefferson College became the first community college in Missouri to be designated as an area vocational school. That was really big, and I know my dad worked very hard to help assist a lot of people in putting together these VOTEC schools around the state. The college has been an innovator and a leader in Missouri and beyond during its 60-year history. Business, the humanities, technology, and science. Your nursing program continues to turn out top-notch professionals on the front lines of our healthcare systems. I'm doing this because somewhere Dad is listening, so I got to get all of this in. Speaking of which, people sometimes question my judgment. Speaking of health, if not my sanity, for spending so much time driving around for no good reason. And some folks would rather that I keep my discoveries a secret. Case in point, for 30 years, I have joined a gang of Ozark freethinkers who have made a ritual journey down the Jacks Fork River, launching from its headwaters in early spring, when the water runs fast and full and floaters are scarce. And these guys are possessive of their river, not really interested in sharing this treasure with the rest of the world. For the most part, their secret is safe. According to Tom Wolfe and the residents of both American coasts, you live in the great flyover. It's hard to find anybody who gives two hoots about what happens here, except for us. But that's only because of ignorance, and I'll demonstrate what I mean. You live in the Great Flyover? On a January, it was a cold January day, I was in Manhattan promoting Missouri to magazine editors. It was when I was with tourism. One editor of a magazine that shall remain nameless except to say it's national in scope and geographic in nature. Spat, why would my readers want to go to Missouri? So I told him about the Ozarks and places with names like Devil's Well and Slaughter Sink and Smash Rock. He took out his map and planned his trip. 2 weeks later, he was transferred to another magazine and never came to Missouri. One step forward, 2 steps back. So anyway, some of these pictures, by the way, are all of the pictures except for a few I took on my travels around that some will be familiar to you, and they don't follow my speech, but just in case you get tired of looking at me, you can look at this instead. Here's another good example of the Great Flyover. 2 decades ago, I was in London on the BBC promoting Missouri. It was July 4th, an odd day to be promoting America in London, but they were cordial and greeted me with, "Happy 4th of July, John." Well, happy 4th of July to you too, England. People in London aren't really familiar with Missouri, so here's how I introduced us to them. A few years earlier, a London newspaper had asked its readers one simple question: who is your favorite American? The top 4 vote getters were Mark Twain, Jesse James, Harry Truman, and Mickey Mouse. I also had to explain what a grand slam is to the good London audience, but that indeed was a grand slam for Missouri, and really broke the ice. A lot of visitors came from London or from England, from Great Britain, to Missouri. Okay, so the reason we're here, why would some idiot drive every mile of every road on a Missouri highway map? One word: stories. There are 350 million reasons why Americans travel, but one common thread runs through every traveler: stories. Human beings everywhere relate through stories. Every religion, every nation, every state, every county and town, every family tells its story. You don't want to come home from a trip and sit around with your friends and family and they ask, what'd you do on your vacation? Oh, not much. Tell the stories. I didn't wake up one morning and decide I was going to drive every mile on every road on the map. And I thought I'd been a lot of places. This was back in the late 80s. So I got out a map just to see where I had been. I traced this map and I was really disappointed. I've got to turn it right side up. This is where I had been in Missouri. You can see the blue lines, and you can also see that I have essential tremors. Don't worry, it won't kill me, but it will aggravate you. This is what it looked like, and I was disappointed because you can see that it was mainly the main routes, a few lettered roads, to visit friends that I knew or places that I wanted to see. But primarily, I stayed on the beaten path up until that point. That is when I decided I was going to keep a map in the shotgun side of my car, and in the jobs that I had, various jobs over that 13 years, I would, if I had the luxury of time, and I had a business in St. Joseph or Branson or Hannibal, that I would take the back roads. Filling this map became an obsession, not unlike the obsessions we know our friends have. None of us have obsessions, of course, but we know people who do. I didn't recognize it as an obsession at first, but it grew and gnawed and became the elephant in my room. We, my car and I, drove more miles than Columbus and Magellan and Marco Polo and Lewis and Clark and Dr. Livingstone combined. The only difference between those intrepid explorers and us, the explorers' feats of bravery changed the world. We just drove around a lot. The project lasted 13 years, and it was pretty much my car and I. Cheryl, my wife, who sometimes accompanies me, but she's shopping today in St. Louis, so. Cheryl had little faith in my aimless sojourns, and for good reason. One weekend many years ago, we were headed to a wedding in Perry County. Now, I live in Columbia, Missouri, so we would have come through here, essentially, on 32. And I told her, against her wishes, that I just wanted to take a couple of back roads along the way. And I reassured her that we would get to the wedding on time. We were late. And so I'm very happy to be here with you today. So on most of my travels, it was just my car and me. My car became my research assistant, my trigger, my lassie, my Rin Tin Tin, all rolled into one. And she became something else. She became a writer's device. Her name is Arifnus Catenop, a name that occurred to me as I scrambled to get out of the way of an emergency vehicle coming up behind me. I read the words backward in my rear view mirror. It said ambulance. So to cut to the point, Arifnus Catenop is the name of the car, which in essence is Pontiac Sunfire spelled backwards. That's it. Along the way, Arifnus Catenop and I drove a lot of back and forth, a lot of redundancy just to reach fresh, untraveled pavement. You know, I admire so much the great road trippers, Homer Steinbeck, Jack Kerouac, William Least Heat Moon, who is actually from Columbia. So it's a humbling experience to live in the same town as the guy who wrote Blue Highways. Their journeys, these great travel writers, their journeys were linear, more or less. Mine wasn't so much a trip from point A to point B as it was more like mowing a 68,000 square mile lawn. And how in the world could I get my arms around a trip like that? Early on, an editor gave me some valuable advice. Nobody wants to wade through 700 Missouri towns just to hear their town's name. Tell the stories. So after 250,000 miles of hands-on research in diners and dives and dead ends, graveyards and courthouses and museums, more diners, more graveyards, and a surprising number of open doors, I wrote a book. Now a series of 3 books, and I've brought a few copies if you're interested, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway, get ready for the shakes again. This is my map after everything was done. Now, it took 5 incarnations to do this, because I'll tell you what, I love the Missouri Highway Department. I really do. The Missouri Department of Highways and Transportation does a really good job. But they do not do maps that will last for some idiot every mile of every road on the Missouri Highway map. So This is put together, I'll come back here, with tape, but it is the 5th incarnation of the maps that sat on my shotgun seat as I drove around. Now, we never used GPS or MapQuest, and I didn't drive the car here today. Right now it has 313,000 miles, almost 314,000 miles on it. 1999 Pontiac Sunfire, roll down windows, air conditioner long gone, and you know, you can kind of smell a little bit of oil, but it's still working really good. And my mechanic says that she'll go to 500,000 miles. I don't think I'll make it, but anyway. We never used GPS or MapQuest, obviously, and that's one of the reasons that both the car and I are too old for that. For the first third of this journey, a state highway map was our only guide, and deeper into our drive, untraveled roads became harder to reach. Just to find fresh pavement, we sometimes traveled 100 miles over routes already covered. But there was an even bigger problem. Whenever we reached a state maintenance end sign, my map delivered me to the abyss. We'd idle at the crossroads where gravel and dirt trails disappeared in 2 or 3 different directions, and we'd play a shell game. Any one of these country roads might offer a shortcut to another blacktop. Just over the next hill, maybe, or the next. I knew the rewards. If I guessed correctly, my car would save a gallon of gas. I'd save a half an hour of backtracking along pavement already traveled. And we'd save the aggravation of circling around to a blacktop that must just be over the next ridge. But I could just as easily get lost in a maze of deep woods, dirt roads. There was no getting around it. And then a light bulb came on in my dim noggin. I called the highway department once again. Sure, we have county road maps, they said. They're a few years old, might be a bit out of date. I didn't care. Within a week, we carried the maps that would save the planet from our wasteful wandering. Each county map could cover a coffee table, and each one showed me every gravel road, every dirt road, and low water crossing, even cemeteries. And you know, it was really valuable. And I keep bringing up cemeteries, and I will continue to bring up cemeteries, because that's where I got a lot of my information. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm always taken aback just a little bit. I understand. But when you're in a cemetery and you see that an entire life has been reduced to the full name, 2 dates, and maybe a phrase. And anyway, there's a lot more there. So Erifnus's backseat converted to a chart room, and from that point forward, we felt our way into the unknown with the confidence that we could find our way out. So we drove to uncover the stories, and at the end, I had 40-plus steno notebooks filled with disjointed scribbles. 40 of these. Some were written over the steering wheel at 60 miles an hour. You know, I never texted while driving. I never drank while driving. But my apologies to the oncoming traffic when I was trying to write down what I had just seen driving down the road. And you know, that became a problem. Obviously. But when I suddenly became obsessed, the obsession was so strong that I was going to finish that map before I died, and it was really going to take an effort to do so. I started driving sometimes 600 miles a day. And I did that for a very short period, and then I realized, what in the world am I doing? You know, all I'm doing is just trying to check off another road on my map, but I'm missing the stories. So I had to slow down, and I had to tell my car to slow down. The 4 or 5 times that the Missouri Highway Patrol stopped us, I told the troopers, and they were always very professional, but they said, "You know what you were doing?" And I said, "Yes, my car likes to go fast." Anyway, we had to slow down and realize that, you know, this journey is about smelling the roses, not finishing the trip. And over the years, we drove to uncover the stories once again. We took the long way around the state, and along the way we dodged rabbits and turtles and texters and drunks. We've slid sideways in sleet, jumped curbs and low water crossings. We've passed every pun on every roadside marquee, every time and temperature sign, every clip joint and carny barker and corn dog vendor, every barbecue shack and Tex-Mex taco stand. And we stopped at most of them. And at the end, I had those 40-plus steno notebooks filled with those disjointed scribbles and anecdotes. It was difficult to figure out how I was going to put this story together if I was going to write books about it. You know, just as a side point, too, I noted the stories that I'd heard about people who should be in the Hall of Famous Missourians. If you go to Jefferson City, to the state capitol, on the second floor rotunda is the Hall of Famous Missourians. And there are people there that you would expect. Mark Twain, Sacagawea, many others, Walt Disney. But there are some that are not, and I'm just going to name a few real quick and just tell you why I think they should be in the Hall of Famous Missourians. Most of them are I've written about in the books. Mary Meacham. Mary and John Meacham braved the Mississippi River to transport slaves to freedom. They were school teachers, they were black, and they often had to teach out in the middle of the Mississippi River during the period of slavery. But they did run an underground railroad to Illinois, where even though slaves were free, the blacks weren't treated much better at the time. But anyway, Mary Meacham is deserving of at least a mention. Carl Stalling. Has anybody heard the name Carl Stalling? You know him. He is the Dean of Tunes, and here's how you know Carl Stalling. He was a piano player back in the silent movie days, in the teens, in Lexington, Missouri, and he was so good that he gravitated to Kansas City. There he was discovered playing piano by a young upstart who was starting Laugh-O-Gram Studios in Kansas City on 18th Street, Walt Disney. So Disney hired Carl Stalling, and they did their first movie, which was Steamboat Willie. Eventually they were successful enough that they moved to California and established Walt Disney Studios. Carl Stalling stayed with Disney for several years, but then he left. And everybody thought, "You're nuts! Why are you leaving Disney Studios? You got the best cartoon job in the world and being a musical director." But he went to a place called Warner Brothers. And he is the background to, if not your childhood, to your children's and your grandchildren's childhood in Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes. All of those cartoons, the music is done by Carl Stalling, and he borrowed heavily from classical music. So next time you're out in the yard and your next door neighbor is washing the car and singing, "Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit," that's Carl Stalling. That's the only reason your neighbor knows any classical music. So, maybe not. Ukulele Ike. Anybody heard of Ukulele Ike? All right, Ukulele Ike. His real name is Cliff Edwards, and he had a rough go of it because he would have been the favorite son of Hannibal, Missouri, except Hannibal, Missouri already had a favorite son, thank you very much, and it was really difficult for Ukulele Ike to get any recognition in Hannibal. Well, he gravitated to Hollywood eventually. He worked in St. Louis for a while and went to Hollywood. He starred as a bit player in probably several dozen movies in the 40s and 50s primarily, always usually playing the ukulele and singing. But the way you know him is in the movie Pinocchio, when the song plays, Jiminy Cricket sings, "When you wish upon a star." That's Ukulele Ike. So anyway, he ought to be in the Hall of Famous Missourians. And I have to say, even though my wife isn't here, I love saying this, our dear departed Yogi Berra from the Hill, I would imagine that he is in the Hall of Famous Missourians. I can't tell you for sure standing here right now, but Yogi and I have something in common. We both married ladies from Salem, Missouri. And so Yogi and I spent a lot of time eating at the Tower Inn and playing golf on the 9-hole golf course in Salem. Never at the same time, of course. I had never met Yogi, but I always heard the stories from people in Salem. Anyway, we both married ladies from Salem. And I would tell you my favorite restaurants, but I would have to enter the witness protection program to tell them to you this morning. Many of them show up in my books. I did find the best fried chicken, the best pizza, in my humble opinion, the best barbecue, and I even found the best place to watch the tango. This is what made the drive so much fun. I was coming back, and it was one Saturday morning, and I'd been in southwest Missouri. I can't tell you where. I could go back to my notes and find out. But I was driving on Highway 60 through Aurora, Missouri, or Mount Vernon, Missouri. Aurora was on up the road. And when I reached Mount Vernon, there was a tango festival going on. And there isn't a more beautiful dance that humans can perform than the tango, and the music as well. But I drove right onto the town square where the tango festival was happening, and I learned that they have this festival still every year, the Mount Vernon Tango Festival. Who knew? Who knew? But I just ran into it, so that was fun. All of these places form the fabric of the stories about Missouri. And, you know, it was, at times, I was covering territory that I had covered before, and I was wondering, why am I doing this? I'm missing ball games and some very valuable family time. But I continued on and did it. And the reason is the stories. And I'm going to tell you a few stories. I don't know how much time we have. Dina, are we good on time? Okay. But all of these places form the fabric of the stories about Missouri. And my only request to you, and this is a serious one, is to pass that history, those stories, to your children and grandchildren. You know the stories of your parents and your grandparents. And maybe you're lucky enough to have something written or recorded about your parents and grandparents. Make sure those stories pass on to your children and grandchildren. At this point, maybe they might not be that interested. It may be hard to slow them down or to get their attention away from that electronic device. But do it and make sure that you have them and include them. If you're like me, you may not be that technologically proficient, but your grandkids sure are. And you could sit them down and say, you know what? Turn on that thing and I want to tell you a story. And they will cherish that, and, you know, your story will live on, hopefully, by the generations. Because at the end of the day, we are a community of stories, and that's really important. So, I'm going to tell a couple of stories from my books. One of them I'm going to start off with. I know that this place isn't there anymore, and it's one of the things that you would find if reading my books is that they're a bit dated. You know, when I wrote for Missouri Life magazine for many years, I would always have a tussle with the editors because I wanted to talk about history and the places I remembered when I passed through a particular town that may not be there anymore, but they deserve a mention, along with the things that you can go to now and touch and eat and whatnot. But here's one. A week ago, Grubville was good. Moving along the western perimeter of Jefferson County, my car zagged off Highway 30 down Route W, where we rubbed bumpers with the folks in Grubville at Joe Mama's Hilltop Tavern. Cars parked bumper to bumper on both sides of this country road. We seized the only open parking spot beside the front porch, where people sat around two tables framed by a pair of sleek Harley Davidsons. Near the group stood a deep fryer the size of an old tub washing machine. The cook and I greeted each other with mutual curiosity. He wondered who the hell I was. I wondered how I could politely partake in his Grubville cuisine. How much for some catfish? I cut to the chase. No charge. He startled me. Buy a beer and get some food. Fair enough. I tipped my cap and went inside. This seemed to be a special occasion, but maybe the gathering was ritual in these remote hills as families huddled together around four top tables, taking turns refilling their plates from the mothership table spread thick with carry-in dishes, homegrown tomatoes, sliced cucumbers and onions, baked beans. Joe Mama's is the real deal. They keep it simple, and except for big feeds like today, the tavern specializes in two basic food groups: cans or bottles. The place was crowded, but then from what I hear, it's always crowded, this being the gathering place for miles around. There were no open seats at the bar, polished by the elbows of a dozen generations. Locals offered snippets of history about the place. It survived almost 40 years with the same name. Used to be a gas station. Before that, it was a Model A showroom. An old country tavern might cause kids to get bored fast. Yet the Grubville children were fully engaged in games of tag and hide and seek, buzzing through the crowd of adults like horseflies. Not an iPhone in sight. Fortified with grub, I headed to a pirate's hideout. Rumors persist that 3 centuries ago, during high water on the Mississippi River, the pirate Blackbeard sailed up Joaquin Creek. Is that the way you say it, or Joachim? Joachim? Joachim. Okay, Joachim. West of Herculaneum, and buried treasure at what is now called Blackbeard's Cache Natural Bridge. According to legend, waters receded and Blackbeard's vessel ran aground. The crew rolled the ship on logs 4 miles back to the Mississippi. Sounds like a tall tale. Maybe locals got tired of telling stories about Jesse James. Today, Blackbeard's Cache Natural Bridge keeps the name, and it's a great spot to hide your loot if you don't mind treasure hunters. Anyway, more time? Okay.
More.
Yeah, let's go to the Mississippi. We drifted past the mouth of the Merrimack River. Oh, I have to stop and tell you. All right, so this was shortly after I had left the Division of Tourism. And I got a call from a friend down in southwest Missouri that said, there is a guy that has built a raft, and he is going from head of passes, from the headwaters of the Mississippi in Minnesota to head of passes, Louisiana. I think I've got that right. Anyway, he's looking for crew members to help him do this raft down the Mississippi. Now, I'm adventurous, but I wasn't sure I was going to do this until my friend said he is a producer for Saturday Night Live. And I thought, okay, this could be interesting. I'd like to get to know this guy. And so I called him, and I couldn't do the entire trip, but I got on. I met him sight unseen, and another couple of crew members got on at the same time. We had dinner on the hill one night, and the next morning we hopped on this raft and beneath the arch, right next to this fireboat named the Jack Buck, and we took off on this raft. And you've seen pictures of the raft, the one with the blue. It was quite the deal. And it was really an interesting trip. I was on the raft for 4 days, got off in Chester, Illinois, and we all know what Chester is, home of Popeye. So I thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, my 4 days on the raft was a unique experience. And the guy who was the producer for Saturday Night Live, his name was Justice McClarty. And he was from Midland, Texas, and anyway, he didn't fit the profile of a New York producer for a late night TV show, but he was fun nonetheless. So this is as we were coming down the Mississippi, drifting. We did have an outboard motor to get out of the way of the big rigs, but anyway. We drifted past the mouth of the Merrimack River at Arnold and stopped at Hoppy's, an oasis for fuel-hungry passengers, pleasure craft motoring between St. Louis and Cape Girardeau. We didn't need fuel, of course. We'd just heard about the legendary Hoppy's, the waterfront welcome mat that leads to the tiny tourist community of Kimmswick. We sat with Fern and Hoppy on the sprawling dock in a mismatched set of Elvis-era overstuffed chairs, and for hours we watched the river roll by while feasting on river tales. Hoppy is among the last of the lamplighters, the guys who made sure the channel marker buoys had enough kerosene to burn through the night as beacons for anybody silly enough to be on the river after dark. The lamplighters were replaced in 1954 by a system of electric lights. For dessert, we hiked a half mile to the world-famous Blue Owl, where Mary Hostetter bakes big pies. How big? Some pies have their own zip codes. I delved into a Levy-High apple pie. Mary's love for baking evolved into the classic business success story. After winning just about every baking competition around, she started selling her sweets in a Kimmswick tea room in 1985. The business took off, though it almost got washed away. The tiny arts community survived the Great Flood of '93 thanks to townspeople who pitched in on a heroic sandbagging effort to keep floodwaters at bay. Today, Mary employs 75 people in this town of 94 residents. Now, that may have changed a little bit between now and then. Is it still around? Yeah, okay, all right. You can tell. Now, see, I told you some of my travels are a little bit dated, and I do
Still get that pie.
and I'd love to. I'd love to get back to Kimmswick. All right. This one, and I'll end with this because I want to open it up to questions, and also if you have a story that's short. But I want to tell this one because it's just fun. It's called Firewater. In an area that has been depressed since the shoe factory shut down and moved overseas a generation ago, Missouri holds one potent advantage over neighboring Arkansas: the powerful economic benefit of sin. Many Arkansas counties still ban the sale of liquor, a virtue Missouri counties abandoned about the same time Pat Nixon's husband abdicated the throne to Betty Ford's husband. Latching on the rim of this massive Arkansan dearth of spirits, Missouri entrepreneurs sit like vultures, just a bunt from the Arkansas line. An archipelago of liquor stores stretches across Missouri's southern border, along the most unlikely outpost roads, in the middle of cotton fields and nothing else. There, capitalism takes root, with prime commercial frontage along the battle lines of sin. Fagus is one such outpost, sitting on the map like the head of a cobbler's nail in the instep of the boot heel. It used to be a timber town until they cut all the trees down. The whole zip code that surrounds this little town shows only 31 people. Yet the town's solitary business thrives. In quotes, "It's odd to see a store out here in the middle of nowhere," said the young woman who rang the cash register at Robinson and McIver. But Clay County, Arkansas is dry. Indeed, many Arkansas counties, voters still defeat the local sale of liquor. So stores perched on Missouri's border sit like 80-proof ATMs to service the needs of Arkansan backdoor Baptists, and my mother's a Baptist, I should know, who drive 60 feet into Missouri to buy enough hooch to wet their whistle. They used to not sell lottery tickets either, she notes about her good Arkansas neighbors, but now they do. So that's cut into her business. No matter, John Barleycorn still provides a good living down here in the land of cotton and the mindset of Cotton Mather. Anyway, that's that.
I'm going to grab the microphone.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
That was
yes.
very entertaining and amazing to see those maps and every road you've hit. So we do have time for questions. Don't all jump at one time.
This isn't a question so much as an acknowledgement of how important the stories are. I was the youngest of my family, and all my other siblings are dead, so I can't ask them about their stories.
Yeah.
Hang it?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
produced 17 nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
So just this last week, I was telling them, get the stories that you remember and write them down. And would you please start making a family tree? I mean, my sister had 11 kids, my brother had 7. And I figured if I needed more, I'd just go visit them. I had 2.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, it's so important, those stories. I mean, my dad, parents came from Denmark, so I'm Danish on one side of me and I'm German on the other side, but I've got nobody to ask.
Yeah.
Unless I can talk to the dead. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, get those kids to write those
Absolutely.
stories down.
That's it. That's it.
And thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, you talk about famous Missourians. Have you ever heard of the name Frank Wilcox?
Frank Wilcox, tell me.
He's from DeSoto. He moved from DeSoto when he was 5 years old, and the family went to California. Have you ever heard of Mr. Brewster on the Beverly Hillbillies?
Oh, sure.
Frank Wilcox.
He was Mr.
He was in
Brewster.
several different movies, and you wouldn't, you know, unless you see the name as the credits, you would realize it's that him. He did
That's interesting.
several movies.
And there are so many Missouri connections to the Beverly Hillbillies as
Yes.
well, including the Dillards.
Yes.
So anyway,
Clark Hills.
yeah.
Other questions?
I've got a comment.
Yeah, Ed.
If I'm correct, I think the governor of the state of Missouri made a statement that Missouri has the 5th most roads of any of the
Any state, yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so I have a trucking magazine I read. Anyway, the truck drivers that travel cross country have said that Missouri is the 5th best, Highway 44, the best to drive on.
Yeah.
I don't know as I would agree with that.
Well, you
I
know,
hate Highway 44. There's always construction.
especially around here.
So I don't know if everyone heard him, but he was saying that that Governor Parsons has said that Missouri has the 5th most roads of any state in the United States. So he's just sharing that.
Yeah.
Really quick, as I'm walking over there, Mary from Blue Owl has retired.
Ah.
Her daughter is running her business, and I bet they have a lot more than 75 employees because she has a commercial kitchen in House Springs, and they supply desserts. A lot of restaurants in Jefferson
wow.
County,
Yeah,
and
I'm
around
sure.
the world they ship that Levy High apple pie.
I was just wondering, was there one part of Missouri that you enjoyed the most?
Oh,
What
well,
part of Missouri did you enjoy the most, besides Jefferson County?
yes, of course. You know, and honestly, I really did enjoy my time in Jefferson County, and especially going down to Mississippi. But you know, if I had to say where my closest spot to heaven would be, it would be the Upper Jacks Fork River around the Prongs, and I really enjoy being there. Having said that, I had mentioned that I wrote for Missouri Life magazine. They were always looking for stories about northern Missouri. You all are so close to the Ozarks, actually really in the Ozarks, on the periphery anyway. And you can get to Elephant Rocks in 40 minutes probably. And all of that is wonderful. All of the wonderful Ozarks is just fascinating. But Missouri Life editors were saying, we need stories about north of the Missouri River. Get some stories about North Missouri. And so, having driven all through there are just delightful stories about North Missouri. Obviously Hannibal and St. Joe and Chillicothe and various other communities north of the river, but some beautiful land too. A lot of people think that all it is flat farmland, but the rivers, the Grand River and the Sheraton River, are just beautiful river valleys, especially this time of year when the trees are changing. And I had one of the most unique experiences in my drive. I was driving past a huge field while the combines were harvesting. And behind those combines were, I don't know how many red-tailed hawks, probably 20 or 30 red-tailed hawks. And they were coming in behind the combines to get the mice and whatever else they could get. So that was a unique experience. And, one of those things that happens to you if you're out in the middle of nowhere and run onto something just by luck. So.
We have time for one more if there is one. I don't see any more questions, so.
There we go.
Sorry.
So just kind of nosy about the logistics of it, I guess. Did you have many stories where you broke down or ran out of gas accidentally?
Oh, yeah. And I'll be fast. These stories are in my books, by the way, and I do have them here. They retail for $18 usually, and when I speak, I sell one for $15, two for $25, and three for $33. And so if you're interested, I have plenty of copies of the 3 books. But anyway, 2 stories come to mind. There was the remnants of a hurricane that came up through, it was actually Bollinger County and Cape Girardeau County, and I was kind of caught in that, and my windshield wipers failed me, and I had to feel my way out of a gravel road situation into town, and I found a car parts place that was just about to close, an auto parts store, and I got new wipers and saved the day. There was another one in Knox County up in North Missouri. Again, another hurricane, remnants, came through, and it had dropped 9 inches of rain in a very short period of time. So it was still a very powerful system, although it wasn't a hurricane or even a tropical storm, obviously. But I was taking the back roads. I was on a gravel road trying to get from one blacktop to another. And I got stuck, and I was dressed like this because I was, I can't remember if I was just coming or going to an event, but the car high-centered on this dirt road, and I was stuck, so I didn't know what to do. There wasn't a farmhouse, it didn't seem like, within miles. So I walked up the hill, and as I noticed, walking up the hill, somebody had just been around to cut brush, and they had stacked the brush on the side of the road in like 4-foot sections with 12 or 15 sticks apiece. And I ran the brush underneath my drive wheels and the back wheels, and actually rocked the car off of that high center and got it back on to where I could drive out of there. But it was one of the loneliest times I had had. Anyway, thank you all.